do you do? So nice to have this chance at seeing you.
Welcome to the latest edition of the Cranky Curmudgeon's Corner. My name is Paul Thomas, and this session we are going to be discussing transgendered issues. Joining us tonight, Jack Finkenbinder, Merrick Moses, and Whitney Brooks. Before we get into the political, cultural, moral, and religious aspects of this discussion, we should take a look at the science as described by a non-scientist, that being me. It is my understanding that the traditional view was that the embryo starts with the egg having the X chromosome, combined with the sperm, which could carry the X or Y chromosome. If the sperm supplies another X, then the embryo develops female genitalia, and at birth comes out a girl. If the sperm supplies a Y chromosome, then the XY combination produces a boy. I could get into a more mathematical model of permutations, adding more X and Y chromosomes, but my producer hates it when I do that. So I'll move on to the influence of hormones in gender determination. Research has shown that in the first trimester of hormonal influence of testosterone for males and estrogen for females, these hormones have a major impact on the determination of genitals, male or female. The same research cites that the determination of sexual identity from the same hormonal influences comes in the second trimester. So, if testosterone is the dominant hormone in the first trimester, but estrogen is more dominant in the second, a child could be born with male genitals and female feelings. Do you, panel, have anything to add to or dispute with these highly abridged explanations? Merrick, how much medical information do you have on this particular issue? And is there anything I said that you feel is wrong or needs to be added to?
No, from my research, there are a number of factors that go into making someone LGBTQ. And then when we're talking about transgender folks, the hormones may vary in terms of volume and things of that nature. There have also been studies done that talk about um brain activity of transgender individuals, and studies have shown that there are people who are hardwired in different ways. Even though someone may be born in female body, their brain may not line up with that designation, and skew more towards a masculinity. The same goes for those who were born assigned male at birth, and they may have a brain that don't necessarily align with the male identity, and skew more towards femininity. There are various gender variations in the human population. In fact, PBS has a map of gender variant cultures around the world. So this phenomenon is not new. It's just recently been studied scientifically.
So it is basically a scientific fact that we can have not just single male or female genders, but variations of that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even when we look at the indigenous people on this continent, there have been two-spirit people, which people would consider today as trans people. And throughout the world, there are different names for people who may be considered third gender. We would know that as transgender or transsexual. So this is a thing that has been on the planet for millennia.
For millennia. Whitney, you have anything to add to the explanation that I gave or to what Merrick has told us?
Um, sort of. And I apologize if I repeat anything that Merrick said already. My internet froze and I didn't hear a lot of what was said. But honestly, I don't really know. I don't understand the science. I don't know that there is like a ton of science to it because gender, not sex, but gender is the social construct. Like it's all made up bullshit because of, a number of factors, including colonization and white supremacy and all of those things. But I don't know. I mean, I think at the end of the day, I don't really need to understand the science because it's like I said, gender is a social construct, and how someone else identifies at the end of the day is just not any of my business. I don't need to understand it. I just have to respect it. That's what it boils down to.
But the thing is about it being a social construct is that the people who don't respect it are the ones that don't care at all about whether it's scientifically provable or not. They just say that God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve, and they leave it at that by not exploring any of the science behind it. Whereas if they did follow science and had respect for science, they might see things a little bit differently.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, Jack, you have anything to add or dispute about what I, Whitney, or Merrick has said so far?
Yeah, I have a little bit to add. So I haven't looked into the science really of like how hormones can affect your gender and sex during pregnancy. But I have had personal experience just over the years because I'm not very straight, if you will. I'm definitely not. I've always been a little odd, and I always knew that. And I've actually recently had friends ask me and tell me, "Hey, you should get hormone testing done to see what like how your levels of hormone are." And I'm like, I don't understand how that affects me, but hey, maybe one day I'll see if there's something there that I can, I don't know, look into, see if that's affecting how my brain works a little bit. But yeah, I've always known that I'm not super feminine and sometimes I'm not super masculine either. So no, it kind of changes throughout the month and throughout several months, which I think could be due to different hormones and hormone levels. I'm not sure.
So you're not going into the science as much as the personal experience you have
Yeah.
that leads you to believe that this is a real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Accusations are being made that liberal groomers are forcing children to have sex change operations before their 18th birthday. I haven't seen any actual examples of this procedure since my QAnon membership expired. So, what do you suggest the method of response should be to this particular lie? How about gender affirming therapy for kids who want it? Should parents have the right to request this medical treatment for their kids when they observe the need for it? Whitney, I don't know how much experience you have with your job and when you come across this, but basically the question is, shouldn't people who have no business in that family decision stay the fuck out of it?
Yeah. Yes. My response whenever people get all up in arms about things like that is to try to keep my cool and just explain that. So the reason that you haven't come across any examples of that is because it's never happened and it won't. Like it just nobody is forcing their kids to do anything, and nobody is getting surgery before they turn 18. Like here's what happens. So I have not yet had a transgender student that I know of. But I have met children who are transgender as young as 5. And here is how the transition works when you are a child. What happens is you might change your pronouns, you might change your name, and you might change the way that you present to the world. And that's it. That's all that happens. When they get a little bit older, they may decide to opt for a hormone, like a puberty blocker that is like surgically implanted, but it's like not, I mean, it's just a little device that gets implanted in. It's nothing. And it just will keep that person from through going through puberty and
Now,
having
what's the purpose of that? Is that beneficial? The puberty blocker? How does that help?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, let's say you have a child who was assigned male at birth and had, made it very clear that, they are a girl, and because like this has happened, they come to their mom and say, "Mom, I know I'm a girl in my heart, and that's just how it is." And so they change, they might, like I said, socially transition. And so I forgot where I was going with this. Oh, so I mean, imagine, I guess, if you will, when you were a pre-teenager. Can you imagine like being forced to go through puberty as you, so you, Paul, you specifically, can you imagine being forced to go through female puberty knowing inside that you were male, and how horrific that would be?
Hell, puberty alone was horrific. And
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
cis, and
And having
yeah,
to
I couldn't
then
imagine
having
how
to,
horrible that would be.
exactly. And that is an enormous reason why the suicide rate among trans youth is so high, because they, their body is going through all of these horrible changes that, just exacerbate their dysphoria. And sometimes they may or may not have, parents that are unsupportive. But getting the puberty blocker then allows them to not have to deal with that, at least. And then as I understand it, then maybe there might be an introduction of hormones. But I mean, it should be a decision between the person, their family, and their doctor, and that's it. It's literally no one else's business.
Right,
It's
right.
not hurting anybody. Nobody's getting hurt. Nobody is being like mutilated or anything. Nothing against their will. There's
So that's just a lie that they're
yes.
okay. Jack, regarding the puberty blockers, you got through puberty okay? I'm guessing. Was there any discussion or talk or how did you handle that whole getting through you're in your 20s now, I take it, or maybe close to being 20. So how'd you get through it? Okay.
Well, okay. Yeah, I suppose. Well, it
Well,
it was
you had good family support
I
though.
had yeah, that's what got me through it is I had really good family support. I had really good friend support. I must have the best friends in the freaking world. But yeah, no, I got through it because of them. It was hard. Some days were harder than others. One year in particular, actually, year COVID started. Well, 2022, 2021. That was probably the worst of it. And then after that, I decided, you know what? I don't care how my body looks anymore. I'm just gonna go with it, and I just decided to be happy afterward with what I got. But yeah, no, it was hard, and I completely agree with Whitney. To be honest, it's nobody's getting hurt. Nobody's getting hurt over puberty blockers. I mean, I'm sorry, like circumcision hurt people more than I think puberty blockers ever will.
Well, the fact that
I'm gonna say
a
I said it.
yeah, there's a knife involved in circumcision, and there isn't in
Right,
puberty
Yeah,
right.
I
blockers.
mean,
Yeah, yeah.
I just want to say, add real quick. I mean, it doesn't, it is extremely rare for anybody to I guess change their mind or detransition, as it were. But with a puberty blocker, you can take it out. It's not permanent. It's not as permanent like a circumcision, like Jack said. You can take it out, and then your body, I mean, it would suck. I mean, it would suck a lot, but you would then go through puberty like you would have when you were a pre-teenager. And yeah, it's just, I mean, you can, it's not permanent. And even if it was, again, it's nobody's business.
Merrick, I don't know if you have the answer to this. I'm just going to throw it out there, and if anybody else knows, if you use the puberty blockers, you get to a point where you're, I mean, I don't know if there's an age, maybe 18, maybe 20, where you no longer are taking these puberty blockers because you're a full-fledged adult. I would think. I'm just guessing. Do you know how that process works, or is that
Well,
something that?
well, let's clear something up about gender affirming care, right? So it
Yeah.
ranges, right? So first of all, I want to say for a lot of conservatives and pseudo fake Christians that worship a rapist, nobody for real is getting all of these surgeries when they're 12. Okay, that's not happening. That's a lie. And every accusation is a confession. There are literally threads on Twitter which show hundreds of pastors and cops and people in business that literally are molesting children. So I don't listen to people who worship a rapist. I don't. Secondly, when we talk about gender affirming care, we're also talking about therapy. We're also talking about physical support that are non-surgical. So for a person assigned female at birth, that may mean that when they start going through puberty, they may or may not take puberty blockers. If they don't take puberty blockers and the secondary sex characteristics show up, uh, female bodied people can wear binders to flatten their chest. They can adopt male or so-called male attire. So these things have been happening. Um, so when we talk about gender affirming care, we have to understand there's a range of things. In terms of the puberty blockers, that's a medical decision that someone would have to consult with parents and doctors to do that. And usually when people get off the puberty blockers and they want to continue their transition, they'll start taking what we call HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. So with that, with the hormone replacement therapy, then we start seeing, because these folks have not gone through biological puberty, then we start seeing the masculinization or feminization, secondary sex characteristics for the person. So I just want to remind people that one of the reasons why gender affirming care is so important for questioning and questioning youth and trans youth is because it allows these young people to, one, express how they feel, two, actually talk to a competent professional that can help them reach their goals, three, setting goals that are attainable, manageable. Okay, setting goals that are attainable and manageable, and that are promote good mental health. So I think that I'm sorry about that. I think part of the problem is the salacious nature of transition for many people. Unfortunately, we do live in a country filled with ignorant people who often have a very, I would say, probably a fifth grade reading level. So their ability to digest information and synthesize said information has been severely truncated by poor education. So they are very susceptible to salacious lies coming from the right, which themselves are trying to cover up their crimes. I mean, the leader of their party is literally, has been seen liable as a rapist. So we have to be very careful in dealing with these people because they are violent and they're ignorant. And so when violence meets ignorance, nothing good happens. That being said, I think what's important for trans youth is for them to get the treatment that they need to be successful people. And that's what we really should care about, creating successful, balanced people who love themselves and will not harm themselves. And that's what gender affirming cares about.
So basically, just if I can tie this together with the puberty blocker thing, you work that until you're ready to take the hormonal treatments, and you get yourself right through that.
Yes.
Okay. The war against the LBGTQ plus community is pretty much out in the open now, along with the position against women's rights to be in control of their reproductive health care. It seems pretty well embedded in the Republican Party. Is it fair to conclude that any alignment with Republican Party apparatus means that one is against equal rights for all Americans? Where do you see organized religion in this fight? Merrick, we're not only talking about transgender women, we're also talking about colored people of color. That am I wrong in making this conclusion here?
No, you're exactly right.
It's the Republican Party that I'm talking about.
Yes. See, the Republican, this is the thing what's going on with the GOP, right? And I think that's ironic that that's one of their monikers, GOP, supposedly meaning grand old party, but actually in this day and time meaning group of perverts led by a pervert. That being said, I think that it's important to recognize that when we're talking about this war on LGBTQ people and women across the board, we're talking about people who, by any means necessary, want the power to dictate our lives by a book written by 6,000, by people who wrote this book 6,000 years ago, who were Bronze Age sheep herders. And I'm saying that as a person who has been ordained 19 years ago as a deacon, and I'm a priest, and I'm also a monk. I've studied the scripture, and I also know that scripture has been weaponized. So what we are facing with this deadly scourge called the Republican Party is a party that is fundamentally against human beings and ultimately the planet. So let's bring the planet into this. And we know that these people are not only pro climate change, but they have championed what we call a carbon rich environment. I bring that up to say that this is essentially an existential war against people living the life they choose. So when they say freedom, it's not FREEDOM, it's FREEDUMB. They really want a society that's gone back to the 50s where white men were king and everybody else was under their feet. What they don't realize is that people are tired and we're over that. We don't want that. We just want to live in peace. And unless this domestic terrorist movement is curtailed and those who are responsible for its proliferation punished, whether it be socially or legally, particularly if they commit crimes by the pervert leader of their party, we will be looking at this for a long time. And I think that it's important. I also want to mention that LGBTQ people, so many people think we're weak and lip wristed. Let me tell you something out here. A lot of us are not playing. There are people that are armed. There are people that know self-defense, and there are people that are prepping and planning in case it goes down. So I think that we need to stop seeing LGBTQ people as the victims of some type of group of perverts and more as survivors who know how to make a way out of no way. We survived the AIDS epidemic. We're still here. They thought AIDS was going to kill us. We're still here. Queer and trans people will always be around. And it's unfortunate that, some of our friends and family want to live in the delusion that a 6,000 year old book is comparable to actual science, the actual science of life, that we know that there's scientific evidence that trans and queer people have existed through millennia, particularly in indigenous societies.
Okay, I let you go on any further, I want to ask about the religion part. Where do you see the religion playing?
I see that people are so turned off by the hate that they are fleeing the churches. I can't even tell you how many people that I've ministered to who consider themselves um uh um what do they call themselves? They are Catholics who no longer go to the church. And they made that decision because they saw the hypocrisy of the church, particularly with the molestation of children and the rape of women and nuns. And so I see that this movement to exclude people, particularly in evangelical circles, is chasing people from the church. The numbers are steadily dwindling. The Southern Baptist Convention is dwindling. Roman Catholicism is dwindling. The churches are going down because because people see the loudest voices in the room propagating hate. That is why people are leaving the churches. People don't want to be associated with that. They want to come and worship and mind their business and go home. There is literally there's literally a magazine editor. I forgot. I think his name might be Ralph Moore. I could be wrong. Where he says that pastors have been telling him that when they give a sermon on the Sermon on the Mount, people are coming up to the pastor saying, where did you get these liberal talking points? Now, these are the words of Jesus now that they are claiming are liberal talking points, right? And so when the pastor says, well, no, this is the Sermon on the Mount, and let me show you where it is, they say, well, that doesn't work anymore. They have chosen who their God is. And for that, people should flee those churches because at the end of the day, if you worship Satan, nothing but evil is going to come from it. And that's what we're seeing now. That's why people are leaving church, because they don't want to be associated with the madness and the hypocrisy too. They don't want to be associated with. And honestly, I don't blame them. I love the Lord. I've given almost 20 years of my life to the service of the people and the service of God. And I can tell you, it's very hard being a Christian, and particularly though someone ordained. There are priests now that won't even wear their collars because they don't want to be associated and harassed on the street. That's how far we are. And I think that the folks are, I think a lot of these folks are hell bent to ride this train all the way out. Well, they can ride that train solo.
Well, it could end up solo. Okay, Whitney, I don't know how tuned in you are to the actual politics of this, but it seems to me that the Republican Party has taken on this mantle of oppression against, transgender, gay, women's rights, as well as people of color. Have you followed that, or do you see it that way, or what's your take?
Um, I mean, as far as like the religious aspect, that is completely foreign to me. I spent my childhood as I guess, a non-practicing Catholic, but as I got older, I moved further and further away from the church and my faith, and today I would describe myself as an atheist. And one thing that really kind of baffles me is radical Christians think that people who don't believe in God or are atheists or agnostics just don't have any kind of moral compass. And I'm over here like, you're the one who's acting like this book that was written thousands of years ago is the only thing that's like keeping you from doing all these horrible things. I'm like, who doesn't have a moral compass? Like, I don't need a book to tell me that murder is wrong and things like that. But I think that I was going to kind of touch on this in like a later question, but I think that the transgender community and like the LGBTQ community as a whole is just being targeted because they're just the next vulnerable group, you know, like first it was the Indigenous Americans and then Black folks. And, you know, and while that, like, all, you know, not to say that those groups are safe and fine now, because they're not at all. Like the, you know, oppression of those groups is still happening, but there are, I think, more things in place to protect those groups than there are the LGBTQ community in some ways. And I think it's just they're like, well, who can we oppress next? I was thinking about let me pull up a quote. There was a quote from Lyndon B. Johnson back in the day saying, if you can convince the lowest white man he's better than the best colored man, he won't notice you're picking his pocket. Hell, give him somebody to look down on and he'll empty his pockets for you. And I think that that's very much what's happening here. I mean, it's just all about oppression in the name of power and stepping on other people to get there.
Yeah, if you want to be the bully in the playground, you're not going to go pick on the tough guy. You're going to go pick on the weak person to show that you're superior to that person. So exactly. I think that's what I'm saying. I'm hearing what you're saying. Okay, Jack, you're in an environment, I'd have to say, that I lived in for 10 years, where it's pretty much dominated by the Republicans. And how do you see their role in the treatment of not only the LGBTQ plus community, but also the women and the blacks and everybody else that, you know, Whitney has identified as you know, people who are more vulnerable?
Yeah. So I'm a rather young person. When I turned 18, I think that was May, and so I got to voting in November for, I think it was state representative was one of the choices on the ballot, voting for state representative, or not state representative. I think it was district representative actually. Um, and I looked up one of these dudes on the ballot, and I immediately, I knew he was a white supremacist, and I was like, how is this? How is this allowed? How is this on our ballot right now? But it's not surprising. I mean, it's a small state, and it is run by Republicans. There are very few Democratic candidates ever for anything here. And they're not well liked or well received when they are led into power, just because of what they believe in and all that. Yeah.
So do you see this this Republican power as one that is oppressing people in society who are like more marginalized, as Whitney identified? You see that happening?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not really out and about shouting to the skies that I'm not straight, because maybe I'd probably get a little hurt on the streets if I did that. So I don't know. I don't see it very often, and I'm also a homebody, so I don't go outside very often. But yeah,
That's
I know
probably a good safe strategy.
yeah. Oh yeah, it definitely is. But I don't see it very often, but I know that it's happening. I have friends that are in a similar position as I am, and they're out all the time, and they've gotten hurt over little things, and just being in the state and being around more Republican or more right leaning people even. Yeah, for sure.
We call them bigots. So basically,
If I could just interject, so when I say our Catholics, I meant recovering Catholics, right? And I just wanted people to know that according to the ACLU, there is no federal law that bans discrimination based on sexual orientation or gender identity in public accommodations like restaurants, theaters, and other businesses. However, state and local laws where you live may ban this kind of discrimination. We're very lucky here in Maryland that we do have public accommodations law and that LGBTQ people are protected in terms of hate crimes and public accommodations. However, the further down you go, the Mason-Dixon, the worse it gets. And so I think it's important to realize that because there is no federal law that actually protects LGBTQ people from discrimination, this leaves whole swaths of populations of LGBTQ people subject to harassment, violence, potential harm, maiming, and murder. This is a real thing that's happening. And why is that? Because the GOPers in Congress won't do a thing about it. So that's something to think about. Like, they're a group, we pay taxes too. Yeah, we are not afforded the protections as other marginalized groups in terms of sexual orientation and gender identity.
And it's not only below the Mason-Dixon line, out in
Oh,
the
of course
West
not.
as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Not on the left coast, but in between the Mississippi River and the Pacific Ocean. There's a lot of bad shit going on there too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, drag shows have joined the ranks of controversial events. I remember seeing in the old World War II movies GIs dressed up as women putting on shows for entertaining their buddies. Up till now, this has all been fun, the drag shows. And there hasn't been any stripping or anything. They're just men dressed up as women. How do you describe the mentality of objections to this kind of fun? Whitney, do you see people with this abject objection to drag shows as something that is right, or why do you think they do that? Why do you think they object to that so much?
I don't know. I think they're just looking for something to be mad about. Like, kids are honestly safer these days at a drag show than they are in church. And because it's just so this past summer, part of one of my jobs is I do a lot of community outreach. And so this summer I did community outreach at a family pride event that had a drag story time. And I had never been to one of those before. And it was so fun. Like, I think people don't understand that, like, are there drag shows that are hypersexualized? Sure, just like there are anything else. But just like anything else, it can be a spectrum. It can be whatever you want it to be. And so there was nothing even remotely sexual that happened at this drag story time. She read a story and then she lip synced and danced to a Whitney Houston song, and she looked fabulous doing it. And they all just commented, like, the kids were so enamored by her dancing and her makeup and her outfit, and it was beautiful to see. And I think, I don't know, people try to make it about protecting kids, but it's not. It's not even remotely about protecting kids, because if it was, if they were so concerned about protecting kids, they would do more with restricting, like, gun control laws, like things like that, if they really wanted to protect children. Because kids are then also, I would say, safer at a drag show than they are in school sometimes, depending on where you live. It's just, I don't, it's absolutely asinine to me that people get up in arms over drag shows. Oh, and another thing I was going to say, I recently found out about, so you mentioned like the old, like World War II GIs dressing up and such. They used to do those kind of like musical review shows to raise money for the military, the army. And so one of those shows like exists on film because it was like made into a movie, and it features, men in drag performing. It features like they were there performing for children and for the president in this film to raise money for the army. And this film stars Ronald Reagan fucking Reagan. And they didn't have anything to say about that. And I feel like that film is just, proof that, drag shows are patriotic and American in their core.
Yeah, Jack, this is kind of a recent phenomenon. I mean, drag shows have been around for a long time, but it's only like the past couple of years that they've found all this moral objection to it. So, why do you think that's occurred so recently?
I think people are just looking for something to get mad at. I think that's all there is to it. Looking for something to get mad at, and I don't remember which one of you it was, but one of you was like, they're just trying to gain power over minorities. And yeah, I agree. I
Yeah,
completely agree.
drag shows, Merrick. You have anything to say about them?
Firstly, drag is art.
Right.
Secondly, drag is art, and it goes back a long way before it was even called drag. In fact, I heard from an elder in the community that drag actually stands for, was it dressed as a girl? That was supposed to be what it meant, supposedly. However, there are some famous people who've done drag. Rudolph Giuliani dressed in drag. Flip
And
Wilson was
Trump was in that video. Trump was in
he
that
sure
video.
was. He
Yeah, yeah.
was, but now they have a problem with it. Flip Wilson was Geraldine. Jamie Foxx was Wanda, Tootsie. Robin Williams, Mrs. Doubtfire. Martin Lawrence was what was her name? Shakina, something like that. I mean, Shakespeare, all of the roles that Shakespeare wrote in his play went in during his life, they were all men who played those parts. Kabuki theater in its ancient days, all men played those parts. So to me, this speaks of the profound ignorance of a lot of Americans who, again, mostly, unfortunately, are reading on a fifth grade level, and their intellectual curiosity has been stunted by poor education. So they are easily manipulated into believing these fantastical ideas about shows making kids gay and all that. I don't know. That's not happening. Okay. It's just not happening. And at the end of the day, I feel sorry for those people that they can't just enjoy an art form. I mean, the 80s was littered with people who were androgynous. Boy George, Prince, what's his name? Stewart, who's saying we don't have to take our clothes off. There are many examples of people who have so-called cross-dressed or were androgynous, but now it's a problem. I think the problem is that people are threatened by this idea of the fluidity of one's gender identity or gender presentation. And because of the ignorance and they don't understand it, they attack it. But why don't they read a book? But sometimes I have to ask, can they read a book? These are some serious questions. And I'm really looking at the American educational system like, what's going on there that these people can't even form a massive critical thinking, like a curiosity. Maybe I should read on that. You see what I'm saying? We have a very serious problem in this country. We have a very big intellectual deficit, and it's growing wider. And that should concern all Americans.
Well, consider the states of Florida and Texas, and you see exactly what's happening. That's the fruition of what you're talking about.